Just welcome to the Dr. Cloud Show. I don't know if you guys see that every time. They've got a new on all the platforms. There's this new little message comes up that I have to hit it before they let me see you. So I don't know if you. Anyway, hi guys. It is another version of the Dr. Cloud Show, and we are glad that you have joined us. This is the place where we talk about life and we talk about our issues, and we are destroying dysfunction one dynamic at a time. I like to use the phrase herd immunity, since that's what we've learned in our recent lives, that we can develop a herd immunity together right here. As everybody gets one little degree healthier, you're getting immune to all the dysfunction that's in the world around us. Getting caught up in people's dynamics requires the Velcro on our side as well. Sometimes, we get hooked and triggers and all this kind of stuff. Well, as we get well, things get better. So let's do that together. And the way we do that here, at least, is you call and we talk. Let me give you the number right from the beginning: 844-940-2774, 844-940-2774. 844-940-2774 is our number to get on the air. One quick announcement: one more day till our big event, 2-hour webinar tomorrow on restoring your brokenness, where mental health and faith come together. And I'm going to be talking about the integration of those two topics, which I don't believe need to be integrated, because I think they're all one, period. I think that life, the spiritual part of life is not a little sliver of the pie. Like, have you ever seen people draw these certain pie? Here's your pie of life, and you got intellectual and relational and career and finances and all this. Well, certainly those are different topics, but they'll always have, one little piece might be your spiritual life. Well, I'm sorry, I don't buy that at all. I think all of our life, the whole pie, the pan that the pie sits in, is spiritual. I mean, our spiritual well-being, all the different aspects of what it means to have a spiritual existence, that gets into all the rest of our lives. It's going to affect how we feel clinically. It's going to affect how we relate. It's going to affect how we perform and why we perform. It's going to really, really get into it. Even our health, your physical life is deeply ingrained with your spiritual life. For example, one little example, all of the research on just gratitude, what that does to change your immune system. And so the spiritual life comes into everything. Well, we're going to be talking about how the emotional healing, our brokenness in relationships and all that, how all of that is healed. Number one, that's what we care about, right? Getting better. And how do we restore our brokenness? But how that's also a deeply spiritual enterprise. So tomorrow, the way you sign up for this is go to boundaries.me/restore. That's the name of the event, Restoring Our Brokenness. Boundaries.me/restore to sign up. And if you can't watch it live tomorrow evening, then you can stream it later as many times as you want. Just keep going over and over. Invite a group over to your house or your apartment or wherever you hang out. Watch it together. There'll be materials there that you can, follow along with and work as a small group even afterwards. So go sign up, boundaries.me/restore tomorrow, July 14th. All righty. Let's hop into our topic for the day. Now, by topic, I don't mean that the callers have to call about this topic, but we always talk about a little idea in the beginning. And I'm going to call this, actually did a one thing on this not too long ago, but whatever we want to call it, let's call it evaluate the moments. I would rather even not. Yeah, we could call it evaluate, but it's also experience. But here's what I mean by this. Did you know? Now, you know this, but we don't know it. That all you can ever be in is this present moment. It's all you can be in. That's all you can be in. for example, I used to hear this all the time, what's all these people going to psychotherapy and, they go back into the past and they go back into their past stuff. What? You got to forget to. No, you don't. Nobody ever went back into their past. You can't do that. Unless, unless you're in some time travel movie, you can't go back into the past. Well, what about if I'm thinking about my childhood and this, that, and the other? That's what you're doing. You're thinking about your childhood right now. And see, this knife cuts both ways in a good way, because people will use it to try to keep people sometimes from going into therapy and dealing with trauma that's happened in their past. Well, forget the past. You can't go back in the past. You can't change any of that. You got to move forward. Well, dude, we don't have to go back into the past to heal the past. You know why? Because the damn past is present today, in this moment. And boy, is that a wonderful, wonderful thing. Because if you're walking around, let's say 25 years ago, as a child, something horrible happened to you, okay? And you kept going through life and nobody ever addressed that horrible trauma that happened to you. Well, that horrible trauma every day has been inside of you still as it was. It hasn't changed. And so while it might have happened 25 years ago, today, when somebody has a flashback, or today, when something happens, they start to feel really depressed. Today, in this very present moment, that trauma is not in the past, it's here today. That child, that wounded child, that abandoned child, that criticized child is alive today. I can sit with a CEO, a high performing athlete, or whoever it is that we think is so strong today, and sometimes just ask them one question. And all the tears come immediately and the pain surfaces. Are we in the past? No, that pain is still alive today. And that's a beautiful thing, because if it's alive today, we can touch it. And see, your past can be healed because your past is present today. In my book, Changes That Heal, I wrote extensively about this. How it's only by being in the present, alive with whatever is inside of us, exposed to the present moment and everything that's available in the moment, that's how we get healed. If you get wounded and you got an infected finger from something that happened a month ago, and you go into the doctor's office, they don't go, well, we got to go back a month ago no, the wound is still there. What we've got to do is now we've got to lance it and expose it to the things that are present today in the moment. The cleansing, the washing it out, the flushing it out, the removing the infection, the putting the medicine in, that only can happen right now. And tomorrow, whatever we're doing will be another right now. See, that's all we ever have. So that's point number one. You don't have to worry about your past, because your past, we're walking around with it, and that's a good thing. Are you ready for this? You can change the past. Well, what do you mean by that? You can't change the past. Yes, you can. Because if you were wounded in the past, and that past wound is unhealed. When we look at it today, that past state of being unhealed can be changed. And now that quote child that was once lonely is now connected with and loved. And that's how the past gets healed. It gets healed in the present by bringing the past into the present, because that's the only moment we ever have. So there's hope for that. That's how trauma is healed. It's how grief is healed. We lost somebody a year ago. We can't go back a year ago to find the sadness. We'll walk around with sadness right now, even though the event was a year ago. So why do I say all this? Well, first of all, to help you know that you can heal whatever happened in the past. It's never too late for that. You are, one of my favorite verses, eternal. God has placed eternity, it says in Ecclesiastes, in everybody's heart. You are an eternal being. That's why when people have near-death experiences, they don't see their life in a line. They see it all at once. Something you can't explain if you've never experienced it. But we were not made to exist in time as we know it now. We are eternal. And so all this stuff is still sitting inside of us, which is a good thing because we can change all of it. That's why we can be healed. Go to my book, Changes That Heal, and read the section on time if you want to learn more about that. But see, there's another aspect to this as well. And that is, by living in the moment, we also get engaged in the moment, and this can affect everything from pain tolerance, for example, to how we're thinking about going into a difficult conversation. And here's what I mean by that. I want you to learn to evaluate your moments. Evaluate your moments. Now, here's what I mean. A lot of times you might be fearing something, but the way you're thinking about it and fearing it, let's say you got to go have a confrontation with somebody, okay? And or a difficult conversation, and you're thinking about how horrible that's going to be, how terrible this is going to be, how awful it's going to be. Okay, if you turn all that off, stop thinking about that, and you say, I'm going to go into this, and I'm going to live in each moment of it until we get in the conversation. And then you start to have the conversation. I want you to ask yourself, so how bad is this? Yeah, it's uncomfortable. It would feel a little tenuous, or, when they're being defensive, it's kind of uncomfortable. But if you're evaluating the moment, you're saying, but how uncomfortable is it really? I mean, I can sit here. I can listen. Yeah, I don't like what I'm hearing, or I don't like what I'm having to say, but how bad is this really? See, a lot of times we'll paint something in the moment. It hadn't even happened yet to be so awful that once we really get into it and live in that moment. I mean, if you got to go to traffic school and you're dreading, you're sitting there. How bad is this moment really? I mean, I'm sitting here watching a screen. How bad is it? I'm listening to some, somebody they hired and trained for 10 minutes to go through the slides in traffic school. And how bad is it really? Yeah, I can do this. I can sit here. And once you begin to live in the moment and be in the moment, which is the next point, just be present. Be present and listen, and be present and engage. Really, really crummy times are going to go by a lot faster when we're living in the moment. But when we remove ourselves from the experience, that's when time slows down to a crawl. This is why when you're sitting in a classroom or a sermon or a conversation with somebody and you're not really engaged, it can seem like 5 years. Probably a lot like listening to me right now. This probably seems like 20 years to you, right? But if something is engaging and something's interesting to you, where did the time go? Oh my gosh, are you kidding? Look at that. Because we're in the moment. And that's how life was designed to be. Now, here's one of the things that comes from the happiness research that they've done all over the world for decades now, that people that savor experience and live in the moment in the experience instead of in that moment living somewhere else. And that's what I meant by there, you can't be anywhere but in the moment at any given moment. When I'm sitting here worried about tomorrow, guess where I am? I'm not living in tomorrow. I'm right here today. Now I'm thinking about tomorrow, but that's a current experience. I'm creating that experience. When I'm thinking about the past, I'm creating that. I'm doing that today, right now. And so I want you to begin to do what one of my favorite verses says and what all of the research shows. And if you even go to the mindfulness research, like on pain management, when we can live in the moment and just observe the moment and be there and be present and experience, what does it feel like to touch my arm? This is what people do sometimes is one of the most powerful interventions for having an anxiety attack is do something that gets them into the experience of the moment. The anxiety attack begins a lot of times to diminish because that has to do with psyching ourselves up about what's going to happen. Well, there's nothing going to happen. What's happening is what's happening. Now you're thinking about something's bad is going to happen. There's no gonna. That's right now. What we're doing right in this moment is creating that. One of my favorite verses. Jesus said, I'm gonna paraphrase it. Just dudes, be in today. That's all you got. He says, which of you by worrying could add 1 minute to your life? You can't. He said, for today, he said, tomorrow's going to take care of itself. In other words, it's coming, people. You don't have to worry about it. But he said, each day has enough worries of its own. So if I'm living today and I'm living in the worry of today, like if I think about, for example, writing a book, that is just a nauseating thought. It is such a big, huge, monstrous task. But when I have to write a book, if I sit down and I pull up a document and I start to think about the concept and I'm experiencing thinking about the concept and I get involved in it, I'm just living in that moment. And I keep living in that moment. I keep living in that moment. I keep living in that moment. That's all I'm thinking about is what is today's moment about this? And then bing, all of a sudden, there's 300 pages sitting there that just came from moments. That's all we ever have is the present. So a couple of takeaways. Whatever you might have felt or happened in the past, you can bring that into the present by opening up about it in a vulnerable space that's available to healing and care and support. And it can be healed and the past can be made different because it's how we're experiencing that past event today that is in part regenerating all of that stuff. You know, if we're still alone with it, it's generating a lot of pain. And if we open up about the it, whatever the it is today, and we're receiving love and care, then that pained child begins to be a loved child and gets healed. That's one takeaway. I mean, what is PTSD? It's post traumatic stress syndrome. The trauma has happened, but post trauma, after trauma, it keeps getting replayed. That's happening today. So we got to get into the moment of healing. Secondly, to live in the moment is going to reduce the pain and the strain of the moment many times. In the past 20 months, I've had two surgeries that are knee replacement and spine surgery. And in some of the worst pain, what I learned was to be in the pain and experience the pain and observe the pain and be in it. Actually, you can't say it reduced the pain. It made the experience of the pain different, and it lessened it in some way when you know all the opioids weren't taking it away. I was wolfing them down those first days. And when you're in a difficult conversation or a difficult task, to just be in the moment. I remember that's when I used to do a lot of mountain biking and trying to get up that mountain and the legs just burning. And I'm thinking about, oh, how far have I got to go? How far? No. But if you got into the moment, experienced each pedal and then it's not that bad. It hurts. Yeah, it hurts. I'm observing it. It hurts. I can do this. Living in the moment is key to a lot of good stuff. All righty. So let's live in those moments. And speaking of moments, it is time for the moments to begin to talk to you. If I can get my calls to come up here on the screen. Let me give you a number in case we have a line open. I can't see the lines. Albie is watching the lines way up there in the San Francisco Bay Area. Our team is spread out all over the country. But he's doing a great job up there talking to you when you call in. And here's how you reach good old Albie. Call 844-940-2774. And then you talk to Jessica over on social. She's interacting with you there. And that's on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. She's in Nashville. Our team is all over the country. Isn't that weird how we do that in today's technological world? Anyway, 844-940-2774. So let's go to the phones, and calling from Facebook and YouTube is David in the great state of Ohio. David, welcome to the Dr. Cloud Show.
Hi, Dr. Henry.
How are you?
Not too good.
Uh-oh.
Been going through a lot. One, I want to say at the beginning, you're my favorite author I've read, absolutely favorite author. You've helped me a lot in the past through a lot of your books and other resources that I've read. Been going through a lot. Actually talked with your great friend John Townsend last week, because I've dealt with a lot of trauma in my life, beginning when I was very young, at I believe age 9. My sister's brother-in-law, who shares my name, he died in a drowning accident with two other victims. Then a couple years later, at age 12, one of my first friends in my life died from suicide. Had been friends with her since age 3, and her brother was my best friend. Her parents kind of like second parents to me. A year later, almost to the date, one of another childhood friend, he was killed by his mom in a murder-suicide. His sister almost died too. That made big news, national news. Her sister was reunited years later on an Oprah show. And then when I was in high school, one of my teachers was killed. And then one of my friends, his dad was also killed by a mass murderer, if I remember correctly. And then when I was in law school, one of my friends is a classmate of mine, one of my closest friends there. She died in a traffic accident. One of my uncles died in a similar traffic accident some years later. And actually another one of my childhood friends, he was killed in the line of duty. So from about, I think, age 9 through about age 28, I think I had 7. Yeah. And never got therapy for it. I would talk with pastors at times and friends, but that was pretty much it.
And what did talk look like? When you talk to pastors or friends, what would that look like?
It would seem to help a lot. And I had some friends that, because with my 2 early childhood friends that died, a lot of my other friends know them too, or knew them and grew up with them. So kind of we can talk, but just very sad. I think what always was for me is that I was always waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Sure.
So risk.
Here's what I'm asking. When you said it was helpful, that's the result. But what would it
Okay.
look like? What would the process look like? Where, in other words, usually when people are doing deep grief work, there's a real
Mhm.
letting down, and there's deep, deep pain and sobbing and anger and all of that stuff that comes
Mhm.
in, the fear
Yeah.
and the trauma. Was all of that present in the talking?
Probably not.
Okay. So it was kind of talking about it, and it helped to kind of acknowledge
Right.
it and all that. So what's your
Right.
question for today?
One, because I'm going to be seeing a therapist next week for the first time.
Oh, wow, great. Great.
And I actually started Celebrate Recovery 2 weeks ago, another Keys to Recovery at my church. And been talking with some friends, have been helpful, but I don't want to bend their ear too much. But I want to find out what types of trauma therapy, what type of things should I look for in getting the trauma therapy?
Look for in the therapist, or what would you?
In terms of the type, like what, just other than just like the talk therapy, are there other types of therapy that can help?
Well,
Or
it depends. It's interesting. It's a good question because we hear this, talk therapy. What is that?
Mhm.
I mean, when you say other than talk therapy, what is talk therapy?
Just talking with somebody about it.
Well,
I'm not.
see, that's why I asked you earlier when you said, you talked to some pastors or whatever.
Mhm.
That's why I asked, well, what did that look like? Because when people
Okay.
use the term, and this is what you're going to hear out there, this is why I'm kind of, harping on this. People use the term talk therapy as if that's like, um, it's like I tried Tylenol. Okay.
Okay.
Like there's this one little thing called talk therapy, and it's all the same. And it's
I
not.
see.
What's important is it'd be like somebody saying, well, I tried medicine. Well, what medicine? Well, I tried the
I
pill.
see.
Well, which pill? Because there's 1,000 different ingredients. And so what's important when you say talk therapy is that what broadly that means is, as opposed to, kind of getting dunked in a pool or something, or, going on an outward bound experience or something. When talk therapy means kind of sitting down with somebody and going through some sort of process. So what's important, and this is key when you think about therapy, what's important is, are the right factors happening when I'm in this thing we call talk therapy?
Okay.
Because sometimes, there's a variety of approaches that people take and theoretical orientations. But when you do a factor analysis of all of that, what's actually curative are a handful of factors that have to be present, especially when you're talking about a problem like this. So, one of the
Mhm.
things that I would want for you is that number one that has to happen, in my view, is that the connection between you and the therapist has to be
Okay.
one that in some way causes you to let down, to let
Okay.
go. And
Okay.
that comes from when you feel like you're truly being understood.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that's key, because when we feel this deep level of being understood, it reduces and regresses us. And what I mean by that is you're letting go of competencies that you've used to kind of hold it together.
Okay.
That's why when you see people, if somebody gives a caring word or an empathic word, you'll see people
Mhm.
tear up. Well,
Right.
why are they tearing up? Because their system is letting go of holding back.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
first thing I want you to feel is, and you're not going to feel this immediately, but you'll figure it out pretty soon. do I really feel connected with and understood by this therapist?
Yeah. And actually, that's one of the other things I'm going through right now. Trying not to say too much, but when I'd been in the hospital, I'd been in the ER a number of times in May, like diabetic ketoacidosis and a related delirium. My friend said I wasn't myself, and family too. But one of the other things that has been bothering me, and kind of in terms of understanding and kind of my fears of abandonment, surfaced with it. Months ago, found out that my favorite cousin and another family member were not related. They had DNA tests done. And so after 50 years, find out that, and it was absolutely devastating to me and to my favorite cousin. She's like a younger sister to me. And that was absolutely devastating for her and another family member, and absolutely devastating to me, extremely sad, kind of broke our connection. Because we'd be able to talk to each other, like in terms of being understood. She's the one who understands me the best, more so than my siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of vice versa.
To find out that it wasn't biological destroyed the connection.
Right. It hurt a little bit because we both love genealogy. And so it hurt a little bit. Still loved her. And then what happened is, in my delirium, I said some things which were, I guess, over the top.
Okay.
And,
well, let me kind of take that. I want to go back to your original question.
Okay.
And take what you just said, because it's part of that. See, I started with feeling connected, right? That's important, because that's the empathy is going to reduce it. But what that's got to do is, that's also, when you're talking about healing, the kind of things that you're talking about from the quote, the past, which we've talked about today, it's got to make those things come to the surface where you can begin to process, what feelings were quote /are, because the were is an R now. If it hasn't been healed, it's still there.
Right.
Have to be expressed and processed, because what that does is, in trauma and loss, it gets fused biochemically into parts of the memory structures until it can get unfused by expression and bringing it into the light and talking about it. And that moves it through various brain structures from the limbic system over to other parts of the brain. And then, this is what I said about what you were just saying, then not only is the pain healed as it's gotten out and processed, but new meaning and understanding can be applied to it. Now, one of the things we know about resiliency and recovery from depression, grief, future depression, all of that, one of the things in when people get healed and they get resilient is that their understanding and the meaning of what happened begins to mature and change. See, to a child, there's a meaning that gets attributed to all these things. And some kids interpret it as, all this is happening to me because I'm bad. All this happened, somebody died because I was mad at him and my thoughts killed him. I mean, there's a lot of fantasies that go on in children's minds that get associated with trauma and why it's happening. So just like your biological interpretation, with the empathy and your cousin, that once we begin to learn and ascribe different meanings, and all of our life goes into a longer narrative, then that begins to be healing as well. So, and I got to run to some other callers, but in answer to your question, what you're looking for in good trauma healing, number one is, I would want to know, does this person have experience in what I'm dealing with? How many? And I would ask them, have you treated unresolved trauma before? How do you treat it? Has it been successful? There's nothing wrong with, people ask me, have you treated it? I go, no, that's not really what I do. They ask me something else. Yeah, I got a lot of experience in that. Okay, so I would want to know that. And then secondly, as you're in the process, what you want to feel is that something is emerging and getting in touch with and getting healed, and it's bothering you less. Number three, that your thinking about it is changing. That how you're evaluating it, how you're evaluating three things: self, others, four things: self, others, the world around you, and the future. That's kind of, what Aaron Beck called the cognitive triad. And because those thinking patterns have to begin to change. And then fourthly, developing new skills and competencies of as these things emerge, you want to be developing new ways of dealing with them. Now, if you're doing all of that, it can be EMDR does the same thing. It can be quote talk therapy. It can be Gestalt experiences. There's a lot of different techniques that people use, but when you factor analyze it, it's bringing things to the light, it's understanding, it's feeling connected with, it's processing them, it's reframing them, understanding them with different meaning, and learning new skills to move forward. When you're doing all those things, you get a lot of healing that happens in this. So that's kind of what I would hope.
I think
that's what I would hope.
I think in the past, I'd always, feared if I love somebody, I'd lose them. And that's kind of what.
Well, that's what I mean by that's a meaning and that's a belief that happens from an experience, because why would you think that? Because it was true.
Yeah.
That's why you thought it. This is not an irrational fear, but it's connected to the experience. And as the experience is healed and processed, then that goes into a timeline. And if we looked at the timeline of your life, that is not true. Everyone you love and everyone you've loved and everyone you will love will not disappear. But that experience lives in its own world. And that's why it becomes global and subjective, because it lives in a subjective part of the brain. And that's exactly what I was meaning about as this goes into a larger narrative, we begin to have different meaning. Like I had a car wreck one time. Well, in that moment, one time I've had a few, in that moment, every car I'm in is having a wreck, right? And if I'm frozen in that trauma, then I can never get in a car again. But how many times, how many millions of miles have I driven since then? So that's what this process begins to do. And I'm so glad you're doing it for the first time. And I have great hope that it can be healing for you. So
it kind of reminds me of what you said, kind of almost like of Philippians 4, that we need to really focus on things that we're thankful for and not have everything, be in the negative. It kind of catches and to really refocus.
That's true, as long as we're not using that to deny the negative, because the negative has to be healed. Okay. So I would encourage you. In fact, we'll put you on hold there and you talk to Albie, get your address. I'm going to invite you to give you a free registration to tomorrow's event, Restoring Your Brokenness, because we're going to be going through a lot that I just said that applies to how we get well. For the rest of you, you can register for that by going to boundaries.me/restore as we look at that. Okay, let's go to Michelle, who's calling us from Facebook. And Michelle is our first international caller of the day. Welcome to the program, Michelle.
Hi, Dr. Klett. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing wonderful.
Good.
So,
good.
I do have a question for you. My question is, how do you deal with procrastination? I don't know if they're kind of like simultaneous, where it's procrastination and laziness. I'm 36 years old, and I feel like
wait a minute, wait,
really...
Michelle, wait. Don't ask me right now. Let's wait a little bit. We're procrastinating. Okay. Now we procrastinated. Now you can ask me.
Okay. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that?
Hold on a second. Now, let me ask you a question. Now that you're asking me, how painful is it to ask me? No more painful than it would have been if we had waited another year, right?
True.
Okay, so one of the keys to procrastination is also how we're evaluating in the moment what we're thinking about doing in the future. But You actually get into the experience, which is part of, before I even hear your question, part of the cure for procrastination is to take a little bite. And then you find out the experience isn't as bad as you thought it was going to be. Anyway, so now ask your question. I've procrastinated long enough. So let's have it.
Okay, so I mean, just daily getting up and doing the things that I need to do. I'll be consistent for about 4 days, and then if something triggers me that I've been dealing with emotionally, if I get that trigger, I go right back into my same routine, which is not doing much at all.
So we're really not talking about procrastinating. We're talking about kind of dropping out.
Yeah.
Quitting.
I mean, and the thing is, am I quitting? Do you think that's it?
Or you're not doing it. I mean, you're procrastinating if you're waiting to do it and then you do it. And the waiting is costing you something. You know, people don't pay their bills on time. They procrastinate. They're going to pay the bill, but the procrastination is causing you problems. That's different than starting something and giving it up and stopping. That's a whole different psychological structure, really, that causes that. So which is it? And how do you get triggered?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I have a twin sister. Okay. And I feel like since we were young, we were always compared to each other. And now it's getting even worse, even in the church, where it's like, I don't even think it's people. It's like spirits that get into people to really get us against each other. And I know that the Lord had told me, if I don't deal with, it's not the person, if I don't deal with the spirit of rejection, it's going to end up going into someone else. I've got to deal with that. It's not a particular person. And they'll usually make me feel like, you're the bad twin, and then she's the good twin. So I've always had that feeling of like badness.
Okay, so what have you done? And so when something will happen like that, that depresses you, and then you stop getting up early and doing the things you got to do. Is that kind of the pattern?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly.
And it always goes back to this one trigger between you and your sister?
Yep.
Okay. And what have you done to get that trigger healed?
I've sought the Lord, and He's told me what it was, and that I was blaming people. I was blaming people, and that I had to look inside myself and just be consumed with Him, and to know how much He loved me. And I just sought Him, and I got that. But sometimes the trigger is still there, and I feel like I've got to put in more of the work.
Okay. Well, that's probably.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You got answers.
Well,
I'm listening.
You know, I'm kind of resonating with what you feel like God told you. In one of my favorite verses, and this goes deep into scientific research about comparisons. Comparing, when people compare themselves to someone, it is one of the most destructive things psychologically that anybody can do.
My God.
And Galatians 6, for example, let me give you a few examples because you're a person of faith. Galatians 6 says, be proud of your own work, not comparing yourself to others, but examine your own work and look at it. Now, that is such a simple verse, but there's reams of scientific research that goes into this, that validates this, that people that are always looking for external cues to validate whether they're doing well or not, judging themselves in relation to others, absolutely do worse for 1,000 different reasons. And when they're not doing worse, they stay stuck at the level they are because some people compare themselves to others who aren't doing as well. You see people do this morally all the time. They got some significant areas in their lives that should be addressed. And somebody says this, well, I'm not as bad as so-and-so. He's such a blah, 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 blah. And now I'm fine because I'm comparing myself to some idiot. See, it works both ways. It is one of the most destructive things that can happen. So it sounds like in part of this formative identity stuff that you went through, that you and your sister were kind of seen as a unit, right? You were always evaluated in relation to each other. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
That's correct.
One of the most important things for identity formation is something we call differentiation. And that's where we differentiate from other people, twins included. So for me to find out who I am, I've got to know who I am different and apart from my family, from my father, from my mother, from my sisters. Yeah, we're all one family, but I'm different in some ways. I don't believe that. I don't think that. I do think that you think, but I don't think this. And as we differentiate, that's why you start to see a toddler in forming identity use the word no. No, I don't like that. No, I don't want that. That's part of what God built into us to differentiate, to not be stuck in our identity with somebody else. So I would want you to find some individual identity of who you are. And I don't care whether your sister is like that or not. It doesn't matter. It's who you are apart from everybody else. You follow me?
Yes.
So part of this is going to be you getting your own growth experiences. It sounds like even within your church, you're kind of submerged in this looks like a fishbowl with your sister, right? Everybody's looking at you guys together.
It's not even everyone. It's my pastor. And I know most people would say you should leave the church because it's actually gotten really bad. But the Lord told me that I would have to submit because this is a learning lesson for me. And he would give me the go ahead to go. If I didn't seek the Lord about this, I would have been so traumatized. But
okay, but you can.
I had to get in. Yeah,
that's fine. You can submit to being there and differentiating. The learning lesson may be being next to your sister and disagreeing with her. And when people say this, and you say back to them, you know what, she and I are different in this way or that way. And where you begin to assert who you are apart from your sister. Because everybody's trying to put you guys in this thing, and you're going, well, that's her life. She's different. Let me tell you about my dreams and goals, and here's what I'm learning. And there needs to be a little bit I instead of we. And I would begin to look at some of this identity formation, A, and B, I would probably find somebody good to go talk to. And just like you've done with me, but in much larger scale, of what this felt like. And how and the hurt that was involved. And when you compared to her and start, because there's going to be some anger in here too. You're going to be bugged when you start thinking, I'm tired of being tied together. I want to be a person. Good. You're God's daughter.
right.
He's got another one that happened to be born at the same time you are. But in God's mind, all of us were born together in eternity. And then you just spread that out over a long period of time. Is one thought that he had. We're all twins in that sense. But I want you to work, I would want you to work on differentiating your identity. I'm going to suggest, I wish I had a copy to send to you now that, I used to could send books to people because, after COVID, we shut all the warehouse thing down. But I would want you, go read my book, Changes That Heal. And in the section on boundaries, it talks about identity formation and the formation of owning who you are apart from others. Very, very important psychological construct, because this trigger that you're talking about, it sounds like it's tied up in some of that. Okay. So I hope that's helpful to you. I got to run, talk to some other people, but start to use
Thank you so
I.
much.
You're welcome. The I word. I word is a good word. You know, one of the things about identity formation that's very, very important is I. It's so interesting when you look at God and his boundaries. You know, boundaries have to do with a lot of things. They have to do with but first of all, they're a property line. So, you know, right now I'm sitting in my house. All right. Well, on this property, I am different than my neighbor over here. She gets to choose whatever, you know, she wants to paint her house green, she can. She can't paint my house green without asking me, because on our own property, our own boundaries, we have something the Bible calls self-control. One of my favorite verses, Jesus said, "Is it not lawful for me to do what I want to with what is my own?" Can't be controlled or manipulated. You have choices. So God asserts, I like this. He says there are 6 things that he hates. And then he says, I love it when you guys do this or that. He says, this makes me happy. This makes me mad. I desire this. I don't like that. And see, that's how humans differentiate their identity as well. I can look at my girls and they are so stinking different. I mean, they're alike in a lot of ways, but they're different. And that's one of the beautiful things. And I don't want them comparing themselves to each other, because they're both going to lose. And if they win, they lost, because they think they're better than in some way. Then they just lost the upside of who they could be. And we should never compare ourselves. So I was talking to a guy about Jesus not too long ago, and how we all need forgiveness. And he says, well, you know, you can't tell me that I got to turn to Jesus to be, you know, you think everything's just going to be forgiven by everybody, you know, if they just do this. Said, so, you know, he said, I'm a good person. I mean, you know, look at, you know, I've never murdered anybody, or I've never, you know, done this, or I've never done that. I'm a good person. I don't need this. And I said, so your bar that you're evaluating yourself, this is my goal in life, to not be a murderer, and that makes me a good person? What do you want, a cookie? Because you're not a murderer? Have you never fallen short in some other ways? Yeah, but I never did anything that bad. I said, okay, well, try that down at the county courthouse. If you go embezzle some money, you got to go in court, and down the hall there's another courtroom, and somebody else is being tried for murder. Go tell your judge, well, I know I stole a bunch of money, but I didn't murder anybody. You still got a penalty, right? So comparing ourselves to somebody that we think we're better than doesn't help our lot at all. We still need forgiveness. We still need growth. Well, I'm not in as much debt as so-and-so. Well, I still got this debt. One of my favorite verses is, you know, Jesus says to Peter, dude, you got some tough roads ahead of you. He basically tells him he's going to get crucified upside down. And then Peter's standing there, and he looks down the beach, and John is over here. And he goes, well, what about him? Jesus turns to Peter and goes, paraphrasing, if I want to send him on vacation for the rest of eternity, what does that have to do with you? So this comparison thing, it's not good. Go to the parable of the talents. One person got, you know, 1 talent, another one got 2, another one got 5. The one that got 5 turned it into 10. He said, great job. The one that got 2 doubled that. Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say, yeah, but you didn't get as many as he did. And he didn't turn to God and say, well, I only had 2. You gave him 5. See, the comparison goes both ways, and it never works. Stop comparing yourself to anybody. Your DNA is different. Your genes are different. I hear this all the time. Well, I don't understand. They came from the same family. Bull. No, they didn't come from the same family. They didn't. Well, yes, they did. No, they didn't. Ask Joey about his family. Tell me about your family, Joey. Well, I had 2 parents, and I had 2 younger sisters and a younger brother. Okay. Well, let's ask Mary, same family. Let's ask Mary, tell me about your family. Well, I had an older brother, and I had a sister, and I had a younger. Those are different families, different seasons, different times. You can't compare yourself to your siblings. Stop it. You weren't even treated the same way. You weren't. Different parts of you with your personality tugged at different parts of different parents and different friends. You had different teachers. You have different lives. Stop comparing yourself. This is what's in all the growth mindset research in the last however long that Carol Dweck and others have been talking about. You can't take an event out there and use it to tell you if you're good or bad, including another person. What you got to do is take an event and use it to tell you how to get better. Now, if I'm comparing myself to a buddy of mine and he's gone and he's doing something in business or in psychology or writing books or whatever, and he's doing way better than me, I'm not going to compare myself to find out, oh, I suck. I want to look at what he's doing and ask and get curious. Oh my gosh, that worked great. How did you do that? See, when we compare where we are to somebody else to learn and to be curious, awesome. That's modeling, it's imitation, it's internalization of strengths, it's gaining wisdom, it's teaching, it's motivating, it's inspiring. That's the proper use of other people. Not to tell you that you suck. That's not what we're supposed to do. And there's so much research on this. So stop it. Stop it. Use other people as examples to help you grow. And on the negative side, use people that are struggling to humble you, not make you feel better. What does God's word say about this? Galatians 6. If you see someone who is struggling, caught up in a sin, addicted, whatever it is they're doing, don't sit here and judge them. It says, go and restore them, help them gently. But then it says something else. It says, but humbly, looking to yourself, lest you fall into the same mess they're in. See, comparison to somebody who's not doing as well should be a humbling experience, knowing I could screw up too, not a comparison to make ourselves feel better. And I go crazy, as you can tell, my hair catches on fire when I see people comparing themselves, because I just feel for them in how destructive it is. You can't do it. It's your life that you were given by God. And each of us has to take that life and own it. Use other people as teachers and inspirational models to learn from, but not to judge yourself by. Because if you judge yourself and you come out less than, you're wrong. And if you judge yourself and you come out greater than, you're wrong. Because you're not the same. And we're not going to go to judgment before God at the end. And he's going to say A, B, C, and D. Well, look at my sister, or look at my brother, or what about? He's going to go, sorry, I don't see them around anywhere. I'm talking to you. So we are responsible to own. That's why I wanted, Michelle to own her own life. Forget about your sister. Own your own life. Sorry, guys, I went on a rant. Oh well, forgive me. There's another show that doesn't go on rants. It's probably better. Okay, we're at the end of our time today. Hey, go live a day where you don't compare yourself to anybody. Go live a day where you live in the moment today, where you don't worry about tomorrow. Let's try that. Try that and call me. Tell me how it goes. Okay, quick announcement. I am going to ask you to live in tomorrow about living in today. Tomorrow we're having a 2-hour webinar on restoring your brokenness and how faith and mental health come together. It's going to be one of my favorite webinar topics ever. And that's tomorrow. But right now, living in today, you can go register today, and that'll make your tomorrow different once we get there, right? So go to this website, boundaries.me/restore, and get signed up. So when tomorrow comes, you can join us and you'll have a good moment there. And then you can stream it for many moments after. Once you register, you can keep looking at it. If you can't be there live, keep looking at it or play it over and over, and I'll give you some materials to use as a path as well. All righty. That's it for today, clan. Way to go. Love being with y'all. We have the event tomorrow. And that will be in the evening, actually. I think it's 5 p.m. West Coast time. And I am going to, all things equal, I'm going to try to do the show tomorrow at our regular time. So we'll see if I can pull that off. Okay. All right, guys. Love you. Later. See ya.